Greetings, traveler. I'm SnapJelly, and a while ago I got a few sword designs sent to me by a fan that he made on Sketchfab. Now, I have no fucking clue what Sketchfab is, but apparently you can follow people. So, Stefanus Stavilorond from Budapest, he only has one follower. Now that's disgraceful. Now, if you have Sketchfab or have a clue what it is, then go follow this guy. Link is in the description below. Now, he sent me some sword designs because he wanted to have my opinion, because he's apparently planning to make a game with these sword designs, and that's honestly really interesting. And overall, I quite liked it, and there was one in particular that was quite original, and I actually wanted to talk about it. So I asked him, is it okay if I make a video about it? And he was like, yeah, here you go, here's that video. So that's great. I am now just in front of my computer, and I'm just gonna look at the swords individually and say what I think about them. So there you go. The first one is the Fortunish High Elven Sword. Now, one thing that I want to mention first is that all of his sword designs have round grips, right? The parts that you hold with your hand, they're completely round. Now, I don't know what the limits are of like sculpting, 3D modeling weapons and such, but in video games it usually doesn't mind, but in real life, the grip of a sword is rarely completely round. This is for one reason. It's edge alignment. You see, as you cut somebody, you need to get the edge, the sharp part, precisely into your opponent. If you get it off just a little bit, the cut just doesn't do nearly as much, if it does anything. Now, if your handle of your sword is oval shaped, holding it like this is not comfortable, right? So you'll automatically hold it like this, so you'll automatically hold it with the edge forward. Now, if your sword is round, if the grip on your sword is round, then you can't really feel what way the sword is turning. So an oval shaped or something that's just not completely round is always a bit better than something that is completely round. But again, for a video game, doesn't really matter. I don't know. That being said, I really like this design. It is a fantasy-ish design, but it looks reasonable. There are three main points that I want to address. First is this part right here, this extra thickness. That has to go. That does nothing for you. That's absolutely it doesn't help you. If anything, it's going to make parrying harder. So that is something that it really doesn't. Added mass on the blade, it can make cutting easier, but you don't cut with that part of the blade. So that's not going to do anything good for you. The handle looks inspired by the Gladius, or the Spada, which, is fine, is normal, and actually, I like the fact that the guard extends a little bit more than it does on an actual Gladius. Now, a guard like this wouldn't be useful for active combat, like if you have an arming sword or something, or a longsword, then for a lot of techniques you use the guard, but you use it to do techniques, so you wouldn't be able to do this, but with that sword at least, but because it extends a bit, it is still extra protection for your hand, so that's something that I really like. And also, obviously, the tip is weird, right? Because it's thinner. Now, people might say that would be a weak spot of the blade, but I'm not really sure, because things like this did happen on falchions, right? They weren't very popular, they didn't happen an awful lot, but they were there. Now, if the blade is just overall fairly wide, that would make it a very cut-centered sword. Cut-centered, is that correct English? I don't think it is. Anyway, the sword would be good for cutting if it's wider, right? But if it's wider, it's also not going to be as good as a thruster. And that's where this comes in. This way, if the spike is fairly long, it would still be easily large enough to stab somebody's internal organs, and you would cut with this part of the blade, which is still fairly wide, and it would still do quite a lot of damage. So I like it. It's a plausible design, and it's an aesthetic that I actually really enjoy. I could see like a fantasy army carrying swords like these, except for that little thick part. That's useless. That needs to go. But the rest is, I like it. Really, it's good. You could of course say that it's still a weak spot, that that the tip part might break or bend or something like that. But even if it does, right? If that part breaks off, then you could still just use the sword as a cutter for the maintainer of the fight. Of course, you would have to fix it afterwards. But so it's a plausible design, and I honestly really like it. I think it's good. Next one is the Hulrong sword. The SnapJelly will run sword. Flattery will get you everywhere. Okay, this sword has quite a lot of things aesthetically that I like. It has a diamond cross section, which is fine. It makes it quite a stiff blade, so sturdy, so good for thrusting. It's clearly a single-handed sword. The grip is relatively short, which I like. It has a little upswept guard, something that I like as well. Arguably, you could say that the guard is a bit too wide. It's not necessary. It doesn't have to be that wide, but that's not really a problem. It's just it doesn't have to be that wide. But the thickness of the guard is something that's really good. It's really thin, and that's something that I like. And also the ring-shaped pommel is again something that I like. It doesn't really do anything for you. It's just something that I find pretty. And actually, honestly, if you think about grabbing the sword with a second hand, then a ring-shaped pommel isn't all that comfortable. But I just think it looks cool. I'd say that overall, there's not that much wrong with this sword, to be honest. It has a reasonable thickness as well, so it would be quite good at armor piercing, I can imagine. I like this sword. There's nothing really. The only it's a teeny tiny little nitpick, but the guard is larger than it needs to be. But it's not a problem. It's just a little something. And of course, you have to keep in mind that this is a dedicated single-handed sword with the grip that short. Next up is the Morthen sword. Morthen Orden'Ath Ilor sword. What a name. Jesus. Okay, so this sword design is really basic. It's really simplistic. The grip looks like it's made of wood, which is okay. It's fine. Nothing wrong with that. And overall, I'd say that the grip and guard are it's proportioned fairly well. I have to say though, it's really straight. Right, there's not much of a profile taper going on, but that's okay. It looks like it's fairly long though. Maybe that's just proportion wise. Maybe it's like a bastard sword or something. But it's a very long blade. You could still use it, but it's gonna give a bit of a wide swing. Also, something that I want to mention is the distal taper. Yes, the distal taper is how wide the blade is if you look at it from the side. It's this. Right, the sword will always gradually go into a point, and a sword should be a little bit thicker near the guard than it is, of course, at the point. That's called the distal taper. Now, most of these swords, except the SnapJelly Hulron sword, I believe, are incredibly thin, which is a good thing because that's really how thin swords are in real life, at least. But there needs to be some sort of a distal taper. If it's the same width throughout the entire blade, thickness, I mean, if it's the same thickness throughout the entire blade, then the blade is just kind of gonna flop around. But it needs some changes. I don't know how hard that is to sculpt or however you would call that, but just a little bit of side information. Most of the swords have that. But once more, for a video game, it honestly doesn't matter that much. Not that I ever let that cloud my judgment. I shit on every fan base, always. Alright, next one. The Royal Knight's sword. This one's more really basic design, and I think it's very pretty. I do think though that it would need a fuller. The grip is white, so it could be made out of bone, which is fine. The Romans did that as well. If you look at it from the sides, you can once more see just how thin the blade is. That is really thin. I think that's too thin, actually. That would just be an incredibly weak blade. That would just break. Maybe it looks thinner in comparison to the grip, because like I said, if the grip is oval, then the grip is not going to look as wide from the side. But that's a really, really thin blade. There needs to be some thickness there, mate. Otherwise it'll break. Next one is the Stephanus Tavelron sword. This is a very good design, once more. Judging by the length of the handle, I would say that it's like a bastard sword. You could use it one-handed and two-handedly. A little upswept guard here, once more, it's fine. Blade is very narrow like that as well. Once more, it's incredibly thin, but, well, we established that by now. One thing I wanted to say about this is that he said that the blue thing inside of the pommel is a diamond. And he was wondering if that would make sense. Now, the thing is, it really doesn't matter all that much. I mean, you gotta keep in mind that usually pommels are hollow. It's not always, but on most swords, pommels are hollow, and they're not necessarily a counterweight. They just keep the tang in place. So if there's a diamond there, I don't exactly know how heavy diamonds are, but you know, that might change the balance a bit, but it doesn't make the sword unusable. And you gotta be prepared to have the diamond, you know, get damaged. Because it will in battle, and you might even lose it. If you lose the sword, the guy who picks it up, he has a free diamond. But, you know, all of that, it doesn't change anything about the effectivity of the sword. I mean, so, yeah, you could put a diamond in pommel. It's just gonna be extremely expensive. But if you're willing to do that, then yeah, you could do that. So that was all of them. Once more, you can follow Stefano's stuff around on Sketchfab. Link is in the description below. You can follow me on all kinds of social media. Links are in the description below. You can subscribe to this channel. Link is not in the description below, but it's down there somewhere. You'll probably find it. You're a big boy. And honestly, I think this is really cool. Right? Don't take any of this as criticism, right? Because I honestly think it's cool that you guys are able to do these kinds of things. And send them to me for approval. That's really flattering as well. So Stefanos, I hope you manage to create your game to its fullest capabilities, and I'm really excited to see how it turns out. And thank you for joining my quest, and I hope you'll join me in the next one. Bye-bye. I can't put my hand on the camera, it's too far away. Awkward.